Hello, this is the RPG Crawler, and welcome to another Indie Game Friday, where each week I take a look at a different independent role-playing game. We've got another casual RPG light this week with a distinctly retro feel. Dragonward. Developed and published by Biterkid, this was released on Steam on April 7th, 2018. Now I see a lot of stuff categorized as an RPG that isn't, strictly speaking, an RPG. And some things that are very much borderline. I've covered several of them in the past. The question really arises as to how far you can strip the basic elements of an RPG down before it's no longer an RPG. For older games, especially in the 8-bit era, there was a lot more leniency in what was considered an RPG than for modern games. Which brings me to the issue that I've been asking a lot lately, especially with all of the retro-style games out there that have been coming out. I've already got my standards for a proper modern RPG set, and I've covered them in the past. There's a bare minimum of qualities a game has to qualify as an RPG in this day and age. But does a recently released game that mimics a certain style of retro game qualify as an RPG if it would have met the standards of the era, even if that's not the case anymore? So Dragonward is one of those games. It's a casual game that mimics games of the Game Boy style era, where RPG-like games often had a fair action or puzzle element to them, but also one of those modern gimmicks. In this case, the characters can only progress one way, down a road towards a dragon's treasure. The RPG elements of Dragonward are thin enough that I'd hesitate to call it an RPG by modern standards, but it is very evocative of a series of classic Game Boy games of yesteryear. In truth, it's less action-focused than an exercise in resource and health management and character advancement, which is something of a distilled version of things a modern RPG depends on. In terms of plot, Dragonward takes a nod from the simplest of RPG hooks. There's dragons with treasure out there, so the main character sets forth on a road to defeat them and claim it. Beyond that, there's not much more to be said. It's all about the journey from that point. Gameplay is super straightforward. You start the game by selecting a sir, a lady, or a hood, which really only affects the character's icon. The gameplay itself is turn-based, and in the spirit of those one-way RPGs that have been more popular lately. The character can only advance along the road, either straight or to either diagonal. In terms of statistics, a character has toughness, in terms of maximum and current toughness, hunger, which has a maximum and current level, meat, which represents the meat you find, tomes of power, which can be used to upgrade certain abilities, keys, and coins. There is a score, although it has little to do with the actual gameplay that I've seen. During play, characters can also receive certain objects, the most common of which are food bags and water. Eating a food bag replenishes a certain amount of hunger, while drinking some water restores toughness. As the character advances, they travel along a lane, step by step. Within that lane, various things are generated. Monsters are the most common thing generated, and creatures are ranked by toughness. If you run into a monster and your current toughness equals or exceeds theirs, you defeat it and obtain a little gold and possibly some raw meat. If your current toughness is less than that of the creature you bump into, you take damage which reduces your current toughness. As you progress through the game, the monsters generate with more and more toughness on them. In the overworld, other things are often generated. Campfires allow you to turn meat you've gathered into food bags. A store marked with a buy sign allows you to purchase food bags and water. Another type of shop allows you to spend tomes of power to increase your maximum toughness or hunger, which in turn allows you to travel further and engage in more powerful enemies. There are also dungeons that you can enter if you have a key. There are occasionally random encounters designated by a question mark in a box, which offer a choice of how to respond to a certain event. These events are not only randomized, but the consequences are too to a certain degree, so there's no guarantee that an event's outcome will be the same as a prior attempt. Finally, in most overworld sections, there are NPCs that can be paid to take you to the next section. Dungeons are handled in a similar manner to the overworld. Again, you have a single corridor to go down, although in the case of dungeons your vision is limited, which can give you less time to change course, either to pick an item up or to avoid enemy clumps. Enemies are generated, as are random piles of coins, but there are also chests, which may contain coins, tomes of power, or the occasional random item. Traps can be randomly found on the floor, and those damage your toughness when you walk into them. Every so often in the dungeon you will come across an exit that returns you to the overworld, and NPCs in a dungeon serve the same purpose as stores in the overworld. Enemies in dungeons tend to be a little tougher than their overworld counterparts, and the shops tend to be more expensive, which can limit your dungeon adventures in terms of length. In both dungeons and the overworld, you can be defeated not only by running out of toughness, which serves both as your attack power and your life, but also by running your hunger down to 0. Every single step costs a certain amount of food, and this makes food management a serious part of the game. In fact, managing toughness, hunger, water, food, and the gold to purchase either makes the progression feel a lot more like an old school RPG than it rightfully should. Even though you're only going in one direction, you'll find that looping and looping and looping to grind enemies for gold and build up a good stock of food bags and potions, while trying to minimize the impact of the random encounters that you have, is a tactic not unlike grinding for experience and gear in older games, and in fact has much the same feel. And monsters don't remain simple roadblocks throughout the game. Eventually, they start being able to move with each step that you take, making avoiding them an exercise in planning as much as plotting routes to gain food and treasure. With its simplified controls and gameplay, levels can actually end up being fairly quick, although since it is turn-based, or rather step-based, a careful approach will allow one to go further, at least until you master a particular level of difficulty. Graphically, the game seems to evoke the old monochrome Game Boy era of graphics, or perhaps the amber screens of early IBM-style monitors. However, it does this in a fairly horrid shade of orange, or maybe brown. Not sure. The music imitates the sort of primitive chipsets of those similar era games, and although it does well, again, if it's not something that you enjoy, it can be a bad thing. And that's the problem with these retro games. They can still generate a sense of nostalgia, but as more and more of these simple games mimic increasingly retro stylings and rarer systems, let's just say that some elements of these older platforms are best left in their bygone era. I personally enjoy the look and feel, but I can also say that if Dragonward's gameplay wasn't as surprisingly interesting as it is, this particular aesthetic, although true to the era, wouldn't be a particular draw to the game on its own. Again, however, one of the saving graces of Dragonward is the price. Even when not on sale, it's only a handful of dollars, and it can probably easily be worth the buy if you actually enjoy these retro games, at least the ones that might have counted as an RPG back in the day. I'm actually getting kind of a little tired of looking at RPG lights, so next week I think I'll take a look at something with some more meat on its bones, stats in its windows, and skills to actually learn and use. For now, though, this has been the RPG Crawler with Indie Game Friday Dragonward. If you like what you've seen, remember to leave a like, comment if you've got any feedback, and subscribe for more RPG content, both tabletop and computer. Until next time, take care and goodbye.